This case is truly sickening, and I'm sure you'll agree that this man, Jordan Monaghan, is pure evil. The reason for this is that Monaghan is a British serial killer who ended the lives of 2 of his 3 children between 2013 and 2016. One of them was just 28 days old. Monaghan also unsuccessfully tried to do the same to his 3rd child on 2 occasions. Whilst under investigation for these offences, Monaghan began a relationship with a woman, Evie Adams, who he abused and eventually killed in 2019 by poisoning her. All the while, Monaghan never showed any remorse for his crimes and continued to live his life as normal until he was finally revealed to be the monster that he was. Welcome to Evil Among Us. There's little information about Jordan Monaghan's early life, but it appears he was born in 1991, either in or around the town of Blackburn in the county of Lancashire, UK, approximately 20 miles northwest of Manchester. While still a teenager, Monaghan began a relationship with a girl of the same age, called Laura Gray, and in November 2008, so when he was around 17 years old, Monaghan and Laura became engaged. Almost exactly 3 years later, on November the 17th, 2011, the pair welcomed their first child into the world, Logan, a happy and healthy baby boy. However, there were already issues in the relationship due to Monaghan's chronic gambling addiction, with him racking up thousands of pounds of debt on multiple credit cards and blowing all of his wages as soon as he received them. This meant the family were in significant financial difficulty. Bills were unpaid and they were in dire straits. On the 23rd of September 2012, the situation came to a head, and Laura, by now pregnant with the pair's 2nd child, told Monaghan the relationship was over. After having this conversation, Laura went on a shopping trip and then received a call from Monaghan saying that Logan had been rushed to hospital due to a suspected paracetamol overdose due to him finding Logan playing next to a pack which had some tablets missing. Laura, beside herself with worry, rushed to the hospital to be at Logan's bedside. However, when she got to the hospital, it transpired that no drugs were found in Logan's system. It had been a false alarm. Laura felt that Monaghan had just been overly cautious due to his love for their son, and this incident and his response appeared to pave over the cracks in the relationship temporarily. However, this incident was the beginning of a sick and twisted game played by Monaghan, using his own children like chess pieces in order to manipulate Laura into staying with him, but also, I believe, punishing her for daring to suggest ending the relationship. The pair welcomed their 2nd child, Ruby, on December the 8th, 2012. Laura later said that the family had the, quote, best Christmas ever after Ruby was born, and, quote, I felt like the luckiest mum in the world with my own little family. It was all I'd ever wanted. I was determined to give my children everything I never had. However, tensions continue within the relationship, with Monaghan continuing to gamble, blowing all the money he earned, whilst racking up debts and contributing nothing to the household. This led to Laura again threatening to end the relationship, and it seems that Monaghan felt he needed to escalate his behaviour, to create a situation where Laura would be so utterly devastated that her focus would be redirected and she would forget about ending the relationship and would ultimately look to him for support. So he decided to murder the children. On the 28th of December 2012, Ruby, aged 20 days old, was taken to hospital due to difficulty breathing. She was diagnosed as suffering from bronchitis and stayed in hospital until the 31st of December 2012, when she was allowed home. Literally, just a few hours later, in the early hours of January the 1st, 2013, Laura was woken up by Monaghan, who said that Ruby had stopped breathing. Laura stated, quote, I ran downstairs and I could see, the moment I looked at her, that she was gone. Laura was unfortunately correct. An ambulance was called, but there was nothing that could be done, and so, baby Ruby, aged just 28 days old, was pronounced dead at 2:45 a.m. The cause of death was determined to have been due to bronchitis. However, the truth is that Monaghan had smothered Ruby in her Moses basket, whilst Laura was asleep. Monaghan had clearly ensured that she was dead before waking Laura, meaning that his pathetic and disgusting pantomime of performing CPR on his daughter was just a performance, likely to make him seem like a father desperately trying to save his daughter's life rather than the one who had taken it. Laura fell to pieces after the death of her daughter and relied heavily on Monaghan to get through this grief, with him taking care of the funeral arrangements and generally being her rock. Of course, the focus became on trying to come to terms with the death of their daughter, and the issues in the relationship seemed to evaporate. Laura later stated, quote, "He just carried on, but again, I just thought that he was being strong for me. I didn't suspect a thing. We focused on Logan because he was all we had left. Jordan had a really close relationship with his son." However, again the same pattern re-emerged, and Monaghan continued to gamble, resulting in tensions in the relationship. On the 16th of August 2013, Laura again had had enough of Monaghan and told him the relationship was over. The next day, the 17th of August 2013, Monaghan said he wanted to take their son Logan, now aged 21 months, swimming. Monaghan took Logan to Waves Water Fun Centre in Blackburn, but neither of them actually went swimming. In the changing rooms, Monaghan suffocated Logan. Then, in an act of ultimate depravity, he secured his son's dead body into his buggy, covered it with a rain cover, and wheeled it home. Claimed that Logan was asleep and that Laura should wake him up before he went out to get pizza. Laura said that, as soon as she lifted the rain cover, she knew Logan was dead. She called Monaghan in a frantic state, and he rushed home and again made a show of performing CPR on the child he had murdered. However, Logan was beyond saving and was pronounced dead. His cause of death was determined to be inconclusive. Laura was so distraught that she had to be admitted to a psychiatric facility. However, Monaghan came to visit her every day, and she leaned on him exclusively to try and get through a parent's worst nightmare. The support led them to rekindle their relationship, and again, all his financial recklessness was forgotten. Sickeningly, after the death of Logan, Monaghan gave at least one interview to the press in which he stated, quote, "It's been like a bad dream, and we expect to wake up at any moment. You never get over losing a child, but we were just starting to move on and then Logan dies. You always expect your children to outlive you and don't think you'll have to plan their funeral, but we had to do it twice in 8 months. It's heartbreaking." He also complained that police were treating him and Laura like criminals. The couple's third child, a daughter, was born in May 2016. It appears that this child, who cannot be named for legal reasons, was again harmed by Monaghan, but thankfully survived despite his best efforts. Specifically, at the girl's christening on the 18th of September 2016, Laura caught Monaghan using a fruit machine, and this led to an argument where she said she would leave him. On the 27th of September 2016, Monaghan was alone with his daughter when he shouted to Laura that she'd stop breathing. An ambulance was called, but the child appeared to recover on their own. On the 2nd of October 2016, their daughter again suffered another apparent respiratory episode whilst alone with Monaghan. She spent 9 days recovering, but no cause for her sudden illness was found in the hospital. Later, it was proven that Monaghan had suffocated his daughter on each of these occasions, attempting to murder her. After this last incident, the relationship between Laura and Monaghan broke down permanently, and I've read alternatively that Laura was given full custody of their third child, but also read that they were taken into care. Either way, Monaghan had no access to his daughter, inevitably saving her life. The deaths of 2 children and the serious illness of another within the same household led to serious concerns amongst professionals, but it was not until January 2018, almost 5 years after the children's deaths, that investigations between the police and medical professionals determined the most likely cause of these incidents was deliberate obstruction of the children's airways. It was then not until April the 13th, 2018, that Jordan Monaghan was arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. This clip shows part of the interview, specifically related to the death of Logan.
You're under arrest obviously on suspicion of the attempt murder of Logan. That's for instance on the 27th of the 7th 2013. That's attempt and then murder on the 17th of the 8th 2013. Okay?
Yeah.
It's as it was before. Are you responsible for either of those two offences?
No.
But he was away when you left Wales?
It was, no. Not when I left.
He wasn't awake. When did he fall asleep?
Just as we was coming out of Wales.
The police didn't have enough evidence to charge Monaghan, and he was released on bail. However, it appears they kept a close eye on him. This included reaching out to women that he tried to start relationships with, informing them that he was a dangerous man. Unfortunately, this did not stop Monaghan from forming a relationship with a woman called Evie Adams in early 2018, when she was just 22 years old. Evie Adams did not have the best start in life, being removed from an abusive household with her brother when she was young, with both children being the victims of violence and neglect. When she was around 7 years old, the fostering agency called Evie Adams and asked if she and her husband Bernard would take the children, to which they agreed, and the pair never left, being loved by Bernard and Yvonne as if they were their own children, and 3 years after first arriving, they were both adopted. At the age of 16 years old, Evie took their surname, cementing her place as their daughter. Around the same time, Evie moved out and began a relationship with her first serious boyfriend, Nathan, and when Evie was around 19 years old, she became pregnant with her first child, a daughter. Unfortunately, she suffered postnatal depression after the birth, and this put a strain on her relationship with Nathan, and they separated, but they would co-parent their daughter, with her spending certain days with her father at his property. However, it appears that Evie was lonely and didn't wish to raise her daughter alone, and she began looking online for a new partner. In early 2018, Evie and Jordan Monaghan met through Tinder and began a relationship. Monaghan sought to control and isolate Evie almost immediately, telling her not to inform people that the pair were together, with her family only finding out because they heard local gossip about the fact he'd been seen at her house. Her parents and friends were concerned, as Monaghan was believed, within the local community, correctly, to be a child murderer, and they begged Evie to end the relationship, but tragically, she dismissed their concerns. Monaghan started to sever connections that Evie had with support, including her friends and also her former partner Nathan, with him threatening to burn down his house if he carried on contacting Evie, and that he didn't care if the pair's daughter was in the property when this happened. However, Evie quickly fell under his spell, taken in by Monaghan's charm, being made to feel special and no longer alone. Monaghan subtly chipped away at Evie's self-esteem, reminding her that she'd been abused as a child and therefore somehow damaged, and that she would not be able to find anyone else if they were not together. The police and social services entered the scene almost immediately, with the police warning Evie the danger she and her daughter were in, as well as taking her to a place of safety. Social services basically gave Evie a choice of being with Monaghan or having her daughter removed from her care, and she initially appeared to agree to stop seeing him, and a restraining order was imposed in May 2018, prohibiting Monaghan from having contact with Evie. However, Monaghan ignored this order, and the pair kept having contact, leading to him breaching the order repeatedly, including in June 2018, December 2018, and March 2019. He appeared in front of the courts for each of these breaches, and eventually went to prison for 12 weeks after the last breach. However, it's clear that he had no intention of relinquishing control over Evie. Due to the continued contact between the pair, in early 2019 Evie lost custody of her daughter, with the child being removed due to concerns that Monaghan would harm or kill them. Evie was devastated, and while she still had regular supervised contact with her daughter, it clearly wasn't the same. By mid-2019, it appears that Evie was looking for a way out of the relationship with Monaghan and wanted to make changes so that she could have her daughter returned to her care. With the help of services, Evie was able to gain a place in a women's refuge in Kendal, approximately 50 miles away. The locations of women's refuges are closely guarded secrets for obvious reasons, as these women are often escaping from men who, if they could track them down, would likely kill them. However, Monaghan found Evie's location quickly, likely due to tracking her phone, and she contacted a friend telling her that Monaghan was following her around everywhere she went. She was advised to call the police, but she didn't want to get Monaghan into further trouble. However, despite all attempts, Monaghan would find a way to continue to slither his way back into Evie's life. By October 2019, the pair were back in a relationship, but it appears that Evie was fighting back, showing defiance of Monaghan's control, which led to more frequent arguments. The tipping point appears to have come over the weekend of the 11th to the 13th of October 2019, when Monaghan, Evie and some friends went to stay in a caravan in Blackpool. Monaghan didn't hide the person he was. He was rude, aggressive, intimidating, and eventually smashed up the caravan they were all staying in. When they returned back to Blackburn on the 14th of October 2019, Evie appears to have told Monaghan that the relationship was over, and she began to look for a new place to live, away from him. However, Monaghan had no intention of allowing this to happen, and, on the same day, he joined a WhatsApp group titled, quote, UK Tablets, and sent a message to buy drugs saying, quote, who's got tramadol, and asking others for, quote, pre-gabs and blues, meaning diazepam and pregabalin. Tramadol is a strong painkiller, whilst diazepam and pregabalin are medications used for a variety of conditions, but, when taken with tramadol, can cause drowsiness, sedation, and slow breathing and heart rate, potentially resulting in death. Within days, Evie's flat hunting had been placed on hold, as she was reportedly being extremely unwell. It appears that Monaghan was poisoning Evie, giving her high doses of a combination of these drugs, which had a severe and rapid impact on her body. By October the 22nd, 2019, Evie was delirious and suffering from abdominal pains. Her body was shutting down. Her breathing was also getting slower, along with her heart rate. In one of the last messages Evie sent to Monaghan on the 23rd of October 2019, she stated, quote, I feel like I'm dying. Unfortunately, she was correct, and her life was ebbing away, and it's horrific to think how scared she must have been, going from active and healthy to dying within the space of approximately 2 weeks and not knowing the reason why. On the 24th of October 2019, Evie Adams had extremely high levels of sedative in her system, was in significant pain, and was unable to walk. Monaghan then administered a fatal dose of tramadol, intending to kill her. He gave her a dosage equivalent to 20 50mg tramadol tablets. This dosage is approximately 3 times the amount that a doctor would usually ever prescribe of this powerful painkiller, and this, combined with the residual sedatives in her body, resulted in an overdose and her death at the age of just 23 years old. Whether Monaghan stood and watched Evie die is unclear, but it's apparent that he was taking steps to cover his tracks immediately. After administering this fatal dosage to Evie, he took her phone and went to work. He then sent himself a message from her phone, which read, quote, I've taken the drugs. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want help. Clearly laying the groundwork to make her death look like a suicide. As with other people like Monaghan, they appear to have real difficulty in understanding how people would actually react in this situation. Because they lack normal human emotions, they act in a strange way, which actually raises suspicion. In the case of Monaghan, instead of dropping everything and running home to be with his partner, who had just texted him saying she was going to kill herself, he finished his working day and texted her aunt, asking her to check up on Evie. Evie's aunt Julie went round there and found her niece dead in bed. Given the fact that a young woman had died suddenly, the police were called and began the investigation. But, whilst they were suspicious, they could not be sure Evie's death was suspicious. It was actually Monaghan's own arrogance and stupidity which raised concerns and led police to take a closer look at him. Specifically, a few weeks after her death, in November 2019, Monaghan told police that he'd found a suicide note. This was apparently hidden in a picture frame which he'd found when he took the photo out to apparently place in Evie's coffin. This was considered very odd, as the note, which as a suicide note was clearly intended to be read, was put in a place where it could potentially have never been found, and it was just by chance that Monaghan had happened to open that one picture frame. Also, the handwriting did not match Evie's. An autopsy established that Evie's death was due to a fatal overdose, and Monaghan was interviewed on suspicion of killing her in both October 2019 and June 2020. He denied having anything to do with her death. Unfortunately, again, the police didn't have enough evidence to charge him, and so he was released on bail. Monaghan pretended to be the grieving boyfriend, including posting this disgusting post on Facebook. So, by 2020, Jordan Monaghan was on bail whilst the police investigated his potential involvement in the murders of 3 people. So, what did Monaghan do? He went back to his old lifestyle of gambling and drinking, and this disgusting clip from around October 2020, so a year after Evie's death, shows him apparently having the time of his life, filming himself singing along to the song Mr. Brightside by the Killers. Due to that being a copyrighted song, I can't play the sound, but you're not missing much. The breakthrough in this case came in late 2020 when the police were able to obtain Monaghan's phone, and this showed him buying the very drugs that Evie had overdosed on just before she started to become unwell. On the 17th of January 2021, the walls finally closed in on Monaghan, and he was arrested on suspicion of murdering Logan, Ruby and Evie Adams, as well as 2 counts of attempting to murder his 3rd child. He continued to deny any involvement and, when confronted with the new evidence about searches on his phone of him trying to source drugs, he said they were for him. He was not believed, and on the 18th of January 2021, Monaghan was charged with all offences and remanded into custody to await his day in court. Jordan Monaghan pleaded not guilty to all offences and went to trial at Preston Crown Court. This trial lasted 10 weeks, and on December the 17th, 2021, the jury found him guilty of murdering Logan and Ruby by suffocating them and Evie Adams by administering a fatal dosage of medication. He was also found guilty of 2 counts of attempted murder against his 3rd child with Laura Gray by suffocating them. Later that same day, Monaghan stood before Mr. Justice Goose for sentencing. Justice Goose stated, quote, "It's difficult to imagine why you carried out these offences, but, having listened to the evidence in this trial, I'm sure that you are an exceptionally controlling, selfish and cruel man." He then sentenced him. For 3 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder, Jordan Monaghan was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 40 years. On the 29th of July 2022, this was increased to a minimum of 48 years when the Court of Appeal deemed the original sentence to be too lenient. Based on this, Monaghan will be around 77 years old before he's able to apply for parole, assuming he lives that long. Concerns have been raised in the media about the handling of this case by several different agencies, including medical professionals, and their lack of, quote, professional curiosity regarding the deaths of both Logan and Ruby, with their deaths not being treated as suspicious. I've also read about a serious case review being initiated at Blackburn Council, inevitably around safeguarding, and why the family was not scrutinised more closely when the children have repeated contact with medical professionals, and why consideration wasn't given to removing the children from the home. In addition, criticism has been levelled at the speed of the police investigation, with Monaghan not being charged with the murders of his own children until 8 years later, and 3 years after a review had established that his 2 children had likely been murdered by suffocation. In response, Detective Chief Superintendent Pauline Stables stated, quote, "The deaths of both Ruby and Logan were subject to review in 2018. We gathered all the information the previous investigation filed. It's really difficult. You've got a loss of evidence from previous investigations because the deaths were treated or deemed to be natural causes. You've got medical evidence that's lost, CCTV, so it's really difficult to investigate historical crimes. Loss of evidence related to the suspicious death of 2 children. I'm not sure about you, but I find this explanation absolutely staggering. The glacial progression in this case and the lack of action by agencies meant that Jordan Monaghan was free to murder another person, a vulnerable woman whose death has devastated her family and left a daughter without a mother. Monaghan should have been safely behind bars a lot sooner, and lives would have been saved." Serious case reviews should result in a report, which can be accessed by the public, and I cannot find any. Potentially they are pending, and I'll likely do an update on this video if I can get hold of them, as they often contain a lot more information, including background regarding the offender. However, even without this information, I for one am struggling to understand how a man this dangerous was allowed to walk around free for so long, free to kill again. This is one of the most horrific cases I've covered, and in order to highlight why, we need to look at why Jordan Monaghan committed these crimes. It should be pointed out that Monaghan did not admit his culpability, and the trial established his guilt, but not his motivation. So this is just my analysis, but I'm very confident I'm on the mark. So, going back to the profile of domestic abusers, these individuals often have backgrounds of trauma themselves, which have resulted in them having low self-esteem and issues with abandonment, and they're unable to cope with the end of a relationship and or being on their own, and so they look to control their partners, eroding their self-esteem and placing them in a position, often through fear, where they feel unable to leave. Control is obtained and maintained through a variety of tactics, including violence, threats of violence, emotional abuse, isolating behaviour, etc. If they feel their control is being defied, for example if their victim tries to leave the relationship, they will implement whatever tactics to stop this, as well as punish them for daring to consider that they have any say in the coupling. So, that is the basic template, which I found is common amongst domestic abusers. But in the case of Monaghan, there are additional factors I think need to be considered, in particular indicators of narcissism and psychopathy. Specifically, I think that Monaghan is a man who is entirely self-centred. No one else matters but him and what he wants, and, in this case, remaining in a relationship. With regards to psychopathy, I think it's obvious that he has no empathy, no compassion for others, and is willing to harm anyone, even his own children, without any regret or remorse. So, together, you have a man who is emotionally dependent on relationships and is willing to do whatever it takes in order to remain in control in these situations, even if it involves harming and killing others to get his own way. This would explain why, whenever Laura Gray tried to end the relationship, he would not have this, and so looked for some way to ensure this would not occur. He figured that the best way to do this was to create some sort of emergency which would completely redirect Laura's attention away from concerns about his behaviour, and he decided on using the one thing most precious to her, but clearly of absolutely no consequence to him, their children. So he created situations where she was in a blind panic when the children were sick, and he would then ride on this white charger, pretending to be supportive and caring, being her rock. However, he needed situations which would utterly devastate Laura, destroy her psychologically, make her look to him entirely for support, and give him further opportunities to act as the hero. In order to achieve this, he killed the children, knowing that this would cripple Laura and make her forget any intention to leave him, and give him opportunities to act as the hero, including CPR on children he knew to be already dead, and organising the funeral, etc. So, rather than taking steps to address the main issue which seemed to be causing issues in the relationship, his gambling, he thought it was a better idea to kill his own children. The absolute evil of this man is so profound, and I cannot get my head around how he could kill his own children, likely by placing his hand over their nose and mouth, watching and feeling their life ebbing away, abusing the ultimate trust that is placed in a parent by a child, and destroying the most precious gift that a person can receive in their life. These children were just pawns in his sick little game. He was no father. He's not even worthy of being referred to as a human being, in my opinion. I think there was also a form of punishment in his actions. It's sickening that he wheeled Logan home knowing he was dead, and they got Laura to lift the rain cover and see her son like that. I have no doubt Monaghan was filled with glee, knowing the impact this would have on her, and he was likely thinking to himself, "So you think you can leave me? This is what happens when you try." Eventually, he formed a relationship with Evie Adams, a woman who had a history of trauma herself, who was struggling as a single mother, and who just wanted to be loved and supported. No doubt, Monaghan presented himself as her saviour and manipulated her into believing that he was the answer to all of her problems. The one positive in this case, and I use that term loosely, is that Evie's daughter was removed from her care, and this is only because I have no doubt that Monaghan would have harmed or killed this child eventually. However, in the absence of anyone else, he targeted Evie directly, and, when she wanted to end the relationship, he poisoned her. Initially, I think this was to incapacitate her, making her so ill that she was entirely under his control. Why he eventually killed her is unclear, but I think that Monaghan knew he could not let her recover, that, if she did, she would tell the police who was giving her the pills, and it would only be a matter of time before he was arrested. She was an inconvenience, and needed to be eliminated. Why Evie took the pills is also a question that remains unanswered, but I think it's important to note that, during the Blackpool trip in October 2019, one of her friends noticed Monaghan giving her tablets out of a bottle. I think it's likely that Monaghan had already got Evie hooked on medication as a form of control, and so she would be more likely to continue taking pills he gave her, potentially due to already being addicted to them. I want to say something in this case to try and offset some potential negative comments. People may say, why did Laura or Evie not know what was going on? Or why did they not take better care of their children, etc.? I really want to stress that unless you have been in this type of situation or seen it up close, it's difficult to put into words how insidious domestic abuse is, how these men are often skilled manipulators who can change people and make them act in ways that, looking back, they may be completely disgusted by. Even if you think both women potentially should or could have acted differently, I don't think that anything that either of them did meant that one should lose their life at the age of 23 years old and the other one had to spend the rest of her life mourning her two children. Nothing they did or didn't do meant they deserved that. So, please be respectful of these women and do not lose focus that this monster, Jordan Monaghan, is the ultimate cause of this. May he rot in prison and then, hopefully, in the depths of hell. On another note, I want to highlight support services if you need to talk to someone about domestic abuse. In the UK, a great place to start for advice and help, especially with escaping an abusive relationship, is to call the National Domestic Abuse Helpline 24 hours a day on 0808 2000 24/7. Also, Women's Aid is an amazing organisation that offers advice and practical support, and they can be found at www.womensaid.org.uk. The website has lots of information, as well as a live chat function, which is active between 8 AM and 6 PM Monday to Friday, and 10 AM to 6 PM at the weekend. There's an option you can click on the website, which quickly takes you to a Google home screen if you need to hide what you're doing from your abuser. In the US, call the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence on 1-800-799-SAFE or visit www.thehotline.org. The advantage of this website is that if you double-click escape, it takes you to a Google homepage, which will mean you can hide what you're doing if you're disturbed by your abuser. The link to both websites will be in the description. However, if you or someone you know is in immediate danger, then do not hesitate to call 999 or 911 or whatever the emergency service number is in your country. So, what's your thoughts on this case? Is it just me that's struggling to understand why it took so long to bring Jordan Monaghan to justice? Please comment, like, share and subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.